Hello. I'm letting Facebook do its thing with loading real quick. There always seems to be a lag. But I am checking to see if I am live in the group. And I see myself, so we are in business. I am so incredibly excited for tonight's special kickoff of our multi-day series. We're going to be spreading over 2 weeks' time. And I'm just wanting to welcome you all to this space. If you are new here, we've had some folks join over the last couple days, specifically, I'm assuming, for this event. Some other folks just happened to find the group for postpartum support in general. So it's a great time to join because we are going to be doing this massively important series in this group right here. Everything is free. It's going to be full of value that I want you to be able to take and apply into your own postpartum experience. We are here talking about building emotional resiliency in postpartum. And we're going to be doing that through talking about recognizing and really honoring this sense of loss that can happen in the postpartum time frame. And I'm not talking about actual physical loss or anything like that, no infant loss or anything of that nature. I am talking about the emotional loss that sometimes we can experience in the postpartum time frame. And this is incredibly common. And one of my reasons I wanted to do this event was to really bring that to the surface and to try to help really normalize this process, while at the same time trying to show that it's not something that has to be permanent, and we don't have to settle with this feeling of loss in all 6 of these areas that we're going to be covering over the next 6 days, and kind of internalize that and take that on in a more permanent way as we transition into our parenthood. And just a quick introduction for those who are new to this space. My name is Jessie Sletton, and I am a postpartum empowerment coach. And I help birth givers exchange surviving for thriving throughout the perinatal time frame. And I really do this by focusing in on highly customizable individual support plans for the postpartum time frame. And I work with folks who are in pregnancy, planning for their postpartum time frame, their 4th trimester. And I'm also working with folks who are already in postpartum, usually up through a year and sometimes beyond, to help them really find their way in their postpartum journey again. So if they're feeling really lost, really overwhelmed, stressed, feeling like they haven't been able to heal fully, they're feeling run down, I really partner with my clients and ensure that they feel fully supported through the plans that we create together. And as a certified nutrition coach, I also heavily focus on nutrition. I think, and I believe, it is one of the most elemental things that we can focus on and have control over in our postpartum time frame. And it really is the foundation to our health moving in to our post-delivery stage of our parenthood. We're healing from birthing wounds. We are healing from such depletion from pregnancy. All of these things can really be supported through the food that we consume. And so I work with my clients on a very simple, delicious, easy 6-week nutrition plan that is included in my one-on-one coaching program. And as a certified lactation counselor, I also help support my clients in their infant feeding journey and their goals that they are setting for themselves and their family. So that's another huge key component, obviously, of the postpartum time frame, and that's something that I offer as well. And all of this really can bring together this umbrella of postpartum mental health and really ensuring that we are caring for ourselves and really doing this soul care and mental health care that really can bleed into all of these other areas and vice versa that we've kind of touched on today. So that is who I am, and this is my community that I have created here. I do these trainings and offerings often, at least once a month, and I also do lactation based training every Monday when I'm not doing specific series like this, where I really try to bring evidence-based information, the latest and greatest when it comes to lactation, and really try to break down some of those myths, misconceptions, some of the woo that can be out there when it comes to breast and chest feeding. So that's something else that I offer as well in this group. So welcome. If you are new, please feel free to introduce yourselves. We would love to meet you. Let us know where you are in your postpartum or perinatal journey if you're pregnant or you've already delivered. Share with us and please come for the information and for the community. I really want this to be something that we all can engage in and take something from. Tonight, we are here to kick off our event that I mentioned at the beginning here on building emotional resiliency in postpartum. And tonight's loss that I will be covering is a really big one. It is one that I feel is the most common, that often resonates the most with postpartum folks that I speak to. And this is true even years down the line. When I start talking about this to mothers, grandmothers, other birthing folks who have older children, this is something that they often will be like, oh my goodness, yes, me too. I definitely experienced this when I was a new parent after delivering my precious little one. And that loss is the loss of self. And it's pretty self-explanatory in the name, but I wanted to go in depth a little bit more about what I mean by that, what we can see, some of the things we can experience when we have this sense of disconnect from who we are and who we were before birth, and who we are becoming and the self that is emerging as we navigate through early postpartum into parenthood, and really kind of how that affects so many different things in our postpartum experience. I do want to mention that I have my phone pulled up over here so that I can monitor for comments, and if you have something that you want to share, please feel free to drop that below in the comments section. If you are catching this on the replay, please feel free to engage in conversation there too. I will be checking the comments for any questions that might come through afterward. Once this is posted in the group, this is staying up in the group. This will be a resource for you all now and when you need it later on. So please feel free to drop any information or questions that you have as we go. If I don't happen to see it for some reason, I will always circle back around and address that after the video has uploaded. But if you see me looking over here, sometimes that's what I am doing. I am looking at my phone to monitor for comments because most of the time it doesn't show up in the live dashboard on my actual laptop. So let's dive into talking a little bit more about this first loss, the loss of self. I'm going to just pull up my notes real quick because I want to make sure I cover everything that I wanted to cover tonight. So my main goal is really to kind of talk about some of the experiences that we can have with this sense of loss of self in the postpartum time frame. This doesn't look the same for everyone. There are varying different experiences within this loss that can often happen. And so I'm going to touch on a couple of those. And then I'm also going to talk about some of the things that we can really do to help build that resiliency, because that is the whole point of this series, is to not get lost in the hopelessness of these losses that we can experience. I really want to flip that on its head and highlight the resiliency and the strength that can come out in these experiences that we have as we are navigating this huge transition in our life. Postpartum and the whole transition into parenthood is one of the most disruptive, um, just transformative, I keep saying that word, but it's so true, transformative experiences that we can have in our lifetime. And so we're going to touch a little bit on how we can really build up that resiliency, and some of the things that I work with my clients on in building into a support plan on how to ensure we can kind of fortify ourselves against completely spiraling into these losses. So I'm going to share one or two of my favorite tips that I work with my clients on. All right, and I'm just curious if anybody is on with me live. It's not showing me if I have anybody live, but if there is anybody on here with me live, let me know. Or if you're watching the replay, hashtag replay, let me know. Does this sound like something that it might resonate with your experience, this loss of self, as we're going along and talking about this? I would love to hear if this is something that you experienced. And the reason for that is really to bring out again this sense of commonality, that we are normalizing this experience, and to not feel so alone, because we're going to talk about this a little bit as I go further, but we can really have a sense of shame and guilt that can sometimes seep in with some of these losses. So I want to try to kind of break through that by really highlighting how common these experiences can really be. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments as we go along. So one of the ways we can experience the sense of loss in the postpartum time frame is really giving yourself over completely to your new baby. And this is something that resonates with me really strongly, because this was kind of how I experienced this sense of loss with my first postpartum experience after having my son. And when we speak to caregivers and birthers who experience something like this, often I'll hear things like, I'm just so consumed with everything. I don't want to sleep. I don't want to put the baby down. I'm with my baby 24/7. I'm watching his smile. I'm watching her little face. I'm consumed almost by the care of my baby. And there's almost this hypervigilance that can occur. Now, I do want to mention there is a difference between this normal range of these behaviors and when we start getting into a clinical side. Okay, there is some postpartum mental health concerns that we have to be aware of, such as PMADs and stuff, perinatal mental health or perinatal mood and anxiety disorders that can occur, which are also very common, but we need to be able to distinguish sometimes when this has become disruptive to life every day, and just kind of some of those other things that we may experience. So I'm not talking about the clinical side here, just to clarify. But there can be this hypervigilance and this completely being consumed by this caretaking role. And it can often lead to this kind of phase where our own needs and concerns for our own self really become secondary and sometimes even non-existent, right? We can really kind of start to see that we're not showering every day, or we're not, keeping up on eating as often as we should, or all these things can start happening, right? Where we start letting our own self-care kind of go to the wayside. And really we can start to feel this disconnect between who you are, so who I am as Jessie, and who I am as mama, as mom, or whatever you relate to for your role to your baby and your relationship to your baby, right? So we really start feeling that disconnect, and we really start to just get consumed by this role of mom or parent or dad or whatever that feeling is, that caretaker role. And you can really start to feel like there's almost no space for you as an individual during this time. You're just so busy with caring for the baby that we just kind of lose touch with ourselves and who we are, right? And so that's one kind of experience of this sense of loss that we can have. And then there's also this other, or sometimes maybe a combination of the two, of this almost disconnect in a different way, where we feel like we're almost disappearing into the background, right? So there's all of this attention and love and affection, as it should be, turned toward baby, right? When baby arrives. But it's almost to the point where we feel like we've become invisible, right? And almost like I've heard it described as like a ghost in your own home and space. You're just kind of there, right? And all the conversations seem to turn to baby, right? Have you experienced this? Well, how's the baby sleeping? How's the baby eating? How are things going with, crying? How's the baby's temperament? Are they easy to settle? There's all these questions about baby, right? And this excitement about this new life and this new addition to the family. Just very normal. But often, sometimes we're left feeling like, what about me? Right? Why is no one asking me how I am sleeping? How I'm healing? Why is nobody asking if I've eaten lately? How I'm feeling about this transition? Right? And so sometimes with these thoughts and these feelings, which are completely valid, they are completely valid, but despite their validity, we can sometimes have that shame and that guilt start to kind of seep in. When we start questioning ourselves, we start saying, we start internalizing this feeling of, you know what, maybe I do need to kind of set aside my own needs and my own hopes and dreams and what I had envisioned this time being, and that I just really need to be focused fully on baby right now. And the importance of the identity of baby and this little being that has come into existence. That is most important right now in this moment. And I need to let myself and what I think for myself, I need to kind of let that go. Right? So I'm really curious if this is resonating with anybody, and if this is something that you kind of have felt, and how that has affected the way you have kind of started to care for yourself, or have started to relate and connect or disconnect with that sense of self. I'm really curious to see if anybody is resonating with this information and how that experience has been for you. Maybe there's a different way in which you have felt this loss of self. For a lot of people, I know you can kind of feel that loss of self with not having time for doing the things that you used to love to do, right? Not being able to listen to your favorite music as loud as you want in the car because it'll upset baby and you need to listen to quiet music or no music at all, right? And you kind of miss that feeling of connecting to yourself and the things that you enjoy. Or an example from my own life, I love to be creative. I am a huge art lover, craft lover, all of the things. And when I had my kids, I lost track of that part of myself. I was too busy, too consumed with caring for my little ones, right? To really take that time to create and to nourish that part of my identity. And that became really hard. And I think what can be really hard too is when we lose out on connecting to ourselves in that way. Not only do we have some of those other feelings that I talked about with the shame when we start getting upset about, kind of going into the background and not being checked in on for us, for our own sake, we also can get some of the resentment building in. Not to baby necessarily, but we get this resentment around, I just wish I had time to do the things that I love doing, right? And you just get to that point where you're like, I just need a break. I just want to feel like myself again. And you get that resentment building up. So that's another way we can experience that sense of loss and kind of the fallout that can happen as we're trying to really recover from this reeling, feeling of our life just kind of completely changing from before. And this can happen even if we've had other children. Each postpartum experience brings about this catalyst of change, this shift that happens on so many levels. And we're going to go more into detail about some of these other losses that we experience, but they are all so interconnected and related. They really are. And some of the other losses that we're going to be talking about over the next 6 days, over the 2 weeks. So we're going to be doing Monday through Wednesday this week and Monday through Wednesday next week. So I wanted to give a little bit of time to process and digest the information we're talking about, because sometimes this can be a little heavy for us to think about. So that gives you that time to kind of process and to catch up as well on some of the videos. I wanted to build in that catch up time for my folks who want to catch the replays. But the other 5 losses we're going to be covering in the coming days are loss of voice, which can be really connected to this loss of self. But like I said, they're all so intertwined and connected in so many ways. But loss of voice, loss of community, loss of world, loss of time, and loss of control. We're going to touch on all of these and talk about how they are related to one another, and really kind of the fallout that can happen with kind of their interactions. So we talked a lot about the loss of self and kind of how we can experience that loss in an emotional kind of subconscious level, and really how that can impact a lot of things, how we're caring for ourselves, how we are bonding with baby, how we are relating to our partners if we are coupled, how we are relating and shifting our relationship with our family and our friends, right? So there's so many things that these losses are tied to in our lives. Now let's talk a little bit about the resiliency piece and the strength that we can see coming out of this experience. And I firmly believe that there are a lot of things that we can put into place to help us navigate this shift in identity. And I think first and foremost, it's really important. One of my biggest tips that I wanted to share with you tonight was to really take the time to honor the feelings that you are having, especially if there's a sense of grief with this loss. Because I think that so often as a society, we're super uncomfortable with the feeling of grief, right? And so we often are met with, well, at least, right? I don't know if you've seen that Brene Brown TED Talk where she talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy. I highly recommend it. It's really short and easy to consume, and it is like so spot on with the way she describes the difference between empathy and sympathy. And so often in the postpartum time frame, we are met with either sympathy or just flat out dismissal with some of the emotions and the feelings that we are experiencing. And that can be so hard when we finally get the courage to be vulnerable, to share those feelings. when they're dismissed, or it's kind of like a they're there sympathetic type of response, right? When really we're looking for that empathy. But something that I want to encourage you to do for yourself is to really take that time to honor that grief. If you are feeling a sense of loss of identity, really take some time to mourn that loss. It's okay to hold that for a little while and take the time to process that. I know we can get into our heads and say, I do not have the time to sit here and do X, Y, Z, whether that's journaling or really just thoughtfully thinking about these things. But I really encourage you to try to find a way in which feels good for you to sit and process that. And allow yourself to be sad. Allow yourself to be missing the things that you wish you could do. That's okay. It's perfectly healthy to be able to sit there and mourn that loss. And there really is no length of time or expectation around how you process that. But giving yourself that time to go through that mourning and to honor those feelings is going to really allow you to truly move forward and to be able to start to build this new sense of self, this self that's emerging in the postpartum time frame. And really meeting that new self with hope and an open heart space, because you've allowed that time to mourn that sense of loss of who you were before. And you're going to find that there are still pieces of who you are. You're not going to be a completely different person that has no fragments left of who you were before. It's just going to be in a different way, different shades of colors. You show up differently, but you're still at the core, there's still something there that was left from before. And so really work on embracing the new and honoring what's left and what you're holding still, and being able to have that space for yourself is so important. So that's one of my biggest tips for really honoring this journey of becoming. We're unbecoming and becoming. It's kind of this process that we all go through. But allow yourself that time to mourn that loss and to be resentful and to be angry and to be sad. You have to feel what you're feeling in order to move on and to heal from whatever you need to heal from and to hold that. So that's one of my biggest tips that I wanted to share with you tonight around that feeling, that loss of self that can happen in the postpartum time frame. And we're really going to start diving in even more as we talk about the loss of voice, the loss of community, the loss of world, the loss of time, and the loss of control as we move through this series. And I'm going to be giving you even more tips and tricks, just the little tricks I have up my sleeve, the really great drops of wisdom that I have that I use with my own clients when we are doing our emotional support planning for the postpartum time frame, and really how you can help kind of, like I've said before, fortify yourself and be able to fall back on these plans that you're creating now for when things do get really hard. Because it's really difficult for us to try to dig ourselves out of a hole and try to find things that work for us when we're already down in there. Not that it's not possible. It is absolutely possible to do it then. But if we can kind of try to do it ahead of time, it's so much easier for us to fall back on that plan. And even if you are in the depths right now, one of the best things that I can say to do is to try to find that support to help you along the way of that journey. And that's exactly what I am here for. That's what I do. I help my clients really embrace this process and to really find a way to create a plan that works for not only them, but for their family as a whole. And really healing this healing journey doesn't have to be a lonely one. It doesn't have to be done alone. You have to do the work, but you don't have to do it alone. And that's why I want to really recommend and suggest schedule some time with me. I'm going to drop my my calendar link in the comments below. I give a completely free 45-minute strategy session to anybody who is looking for some support. And we can talk about where you are in your journey. We can talk about where you're struggling. If this sense of loss is something that's really holding you back in your postpartum time frame, that's really overwhelming you and you're struggling really hard with it, we can talk about exactly what your individual experiences are and where we can fit in some really amazing techniques and support and other things that we can do to help you try to navigate and reach to the other side where you're starting to feel like you can embrace the you who is emerging. So I'm going to drop that below in the links for anybody who is interested in setting up some time. I'm actually going to be opening up some more spots on my calendar as we're moving through this series, because I want to make myself very available for anybody who is looking for that extra support. So I'm going to be doing a few tweaks to my schedule, but feel free to check out the link as I drop it below. And if a time doesn't work and you know that there's a specific time that you would really like to try to meet, you can always message me as well, and we can try to figure that out as well. So I want to try to meet you where you are, just like I do with any client that I work with. So if there's a time on a day that works better for you, we can kind of confer to see and check our calendars and figure that out. So, all right, that's all I have for you today. I would love to hear what you thought about this training on the loss of self. What resonated with you the most? Did one of the experiences I covered kind of call out your own experience? Did you have a different experience of this loss of self that you would like to share? This is a great place for us to tell our stories. It's another great way for us to process what is happening and to heal our stories, and to have that sense of community and not to feel so alone in this process. All right, everybody, I hope that you have a fabulous rest of your night. I wanted to check it one more time. I didn't see any comments, but if I missed you and you were commenting, please know that I will be back around and I will definitely address any questions or comments that you had. I'm super looking forward to tomorrow's training. We're going to be covering the loss of voice. So this one's a little bit more of an abstract concept. So I'm really excited to dive into that, but I think you're going to come to find that for many of us, once we kind of understand what I'm talking about when I'm saying this loss of voice, we again say, oh my gosh, me too. I'm experiencing this too, or I have experienced that. And once again, I'm going to share some my top favorite things that we can do to help with this loss of voice in the postpartum time frame, and plan ahead of time or utilize if we are experiencing that right now in our own journeys. So I hope you have a fabulous night, everybody, and I will see you all back here tomorrow, same time, 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, in this group for the Building Emotional Resiliency in Postpartum, the 6 losses of postpartum, day 2, and we're going to be covering the loss of voice. See you all tomorrow.